Story 1. Prometheus. There was nothing about the old library on the corner of South and 2nd Street to stamp it as anything out of the ordinary. Why? Save for its size, the library was so enormous that it was possible and not infrequent for visitors to become lost in it for hours at a time. With so many shelves to roam through, however, the patrons seldom minded an occasional misdirection. Unmolested, readers borrowed books, returned them, stole them, and guiltily replaced them with the regularity of a well-constructed clock. Every bookcase in this nameless library was an amiable companion to this cycle, every bookcase but one. Most readers overlooked it because it was the smallest bookcase in the library, housing only 5 shelves just wide enough for 5 books apiece. The first 5 books were fairly well worn, clearly having been devoured by some multitude of avid readers. The 5 on the second shelf were significantly less worn. The third shelf had gathered a respectable layer of dust, as though the books on it had been read but rarely. The last 2 shelves had never been touched at all. It was here that the librarian presided, never speaking a word or blinking an eye unless a reader came to ask for a book from this case. Fame of these guarded books spread as fame always does, and whispers behind declosed doors, mutters buried in coffee mugs at chic cafes, drawled through the fog of post-coital cigarettes. The tales in the books were marvelous, singular masterworks that could be found nowhere else in the world. The last 10 books remained untouched nowhere else in the world. The last 10 books remained untouched. Those brave enough to go after them came in droves, offering up jewels, checks, tax exemptions, even Swiss bank account numbers in vain. No bribes would change the librarian's counteroffer. When bribery failed, they came with legal threats, city ordinance slips, guns, gas cans, and matches. The librarian's answer remained unchanged. 1 year per book. In sheer desperation, most acquiesced in the end. Quite a number of them offered up 5, and a brave handful volunteered for 10. Only 3 individuals ever opted up for 15, reaching with trembling hands for the first of the 3 shelves they had earned. In mingled fear and triumph they would read, while the librarian sat like a monstrous frog, digesting silently. One day a woman came into the library, wasted no time scouting the larger shelves or safer classics, and strode instead straight to the little bookcase. The librarian eyed her with dim interest. She carried neither a gun nor a checkbook. Business was business, however, so it simply grunted. 1 year per book. The woman scanned the shelves, moving her lips as she silently counted 25 books. 1 year per book, she repeated doubtfully. The librarian blinked. It was unused to being asked to repeat itself. From which direction the woman pressed. At the look of vague puzzlement she got in response, she clarified, "Are you taking the years that I have already lived, or the years I have yet to live?" The librarian had not truly considered the point before, but after a moment of deep thought, oh, how the poor thing had to strain its limited vocabulary, it managed to proudly sound out unlived years. The woman frowned and chewed her lip as she scanned the shelves again. "Can I offer up one rather than the other?" The librarian's head was beginning to ache a little, but dutifully it pulled up the old rules from its memory and answered at last with a vaguely surprised, Yes, the woman did not hesitate. I will offer up 25 of the years I have already lived in payment after I have read the last word of the last book. The librarian once more dragged out the rules from the dusty archives of its memory, and finding post-payments to be permissible, heaved its massive body out of the way of the shelf. Lips faintly trembling, the woman pulled down the first book. For 25 days the woman sat nearly as motionless as the librarian itself, moving only to turn the pages of the precious books or to fetch the next in the series, tome after tome. She devoured eagerly, finding that the vibrant contents nourished her body as well as her mind. Knowledge grew like fire behind her eyes. The librarian settled comfortably into its cushion of flesh. Along the slow, singular thoughts that made up its brain, it began to wonder if lived ours tasted differently, and the unlived, perhaps they would be more flavorful and satisfying. At last, on the 25th day, the woman closed the last book with an abrupt snap and stood up to face the librarian. Even the librarian could not bring itself to look directly at her, so brilliantly did the light burn inside her. Into endless unrepeated colors and patterns it fractured like a kaleidoscope, thus burning the woman approach. The librarian was almost eager as it grasped the woman's shoulders. Slowly it lowered its great toothless mouth to bear on hers and began to draw the years out, first 1 year, and then another and another, until her college years, boyfriends, hiking trips, and birthdays blurred together into one great rush of scent and taste and color into the librarian's gulping mouth. The librarian's stomach roared in triumph. The lived years were as full-flavored as a well-aged wine. Greedily it sucked them down. The woman flinched under the onslaught as great ragged chunks of her life disappeared in bite-shaped rips, leaving only the books behind. The librarian continued to draw, satisfied for the first time in its long life, as the 21st of the 25 years was digested. The flood of color became brighter, more flavorful. Eagerly the librarian latched on tighter to the limp woman, gorging itself until it swelled up like a great snake. Then all the color ceased midway through the last year. Color and sound was replaced by dimness, muted measured beats swallowed into a great pinky wet blackness. At last the flood stopped, and the woman vanished beneath the librarian's meaty hands. All the years she had lived stripped away. The girl kicked happily back in her hers belly. Her head swam with such wonderful stories, companions in the waiting darkness. When she was birthed a few short months later, the doctor remarked that he had never seen a newborn with such brilliant eyes. She nursed greedily and grew quickly. Her primary school teachers reported that she showed signs of creative genius. The praise of her teachers was disturbingly intermingled with disciplinary taste for the frequent theft of other students' lunches. Hunger grumbled like a half-wakened bear in her belly when she lay in bed at night. Her mother remarked that she had never seen such a good child at the dinner table. She never wasted a single bite. She began to write down the books in between lessons during her freshman year of high school. She was touted as an internationally celebrated author before she was 30, beloved for her 25-book series. And if any eccentric elderlies recognized the first few books in the series, they never let on. In the old library at the corner of South and 2nd Street, the librarian began to feel the first stirrings of alarm. In the months since the wide publication of the new books, the few brave souls who came for the guarded books only read a few pages before returning the books in disgust. Apparently the word must have spread. Within a matter of weeks, the years that had flowed to the librarian slowed to a trickle, then they stopped completely. As the librarian sat alone in its little corner, Annie's gave way to fear. A great emptiness yawned within its belly. When the hunger had grown to true desperation, the librarian heaved itself to its feet with a wordless grunt and dragged its massive form to the bookshelf. One by one, it seized the books and stuffed them into its drooling maw. When the bookcase was empty, the librarian sat down again, staring stupidly at the blank shelves. The defiled books sat like sodden ashes in its belly. It whimpered once, clutching its belly. Starvation swept like a desert wind through its body. It shuddered once, and then never moved again. The newly famed writer was suffering in her own right. She hired on 3 full-time chefs. Hunger Neve, or stopped twisting in her belly even as her flesh began to mound up like raisin bread dough. A great black crevasse widened by the day in her belly. Even as her stomach emptied, her mind swelled with desperate understanding of the possibilities of the world. Strange thoughts that she barely understood bled through the levels of her consciousness until they clawed at her sanity. Hunger and truth and wisdom and fear battled like crazed beasts inside of her until the fabric of her mind stretched to the breaking point. One day, as her pregnant mind swelled like an overripe grapefruit, one last idea of self-preservation surfaced. Her very last. She retreated into her private study, sat down at the typewriter her parents had given her to celebrate her first book, and began to hammer away on and on she went, emptying all the terrible beauty in her head into their pages, until there was nothing but idiot white peace at last. 25 manuscripts lay innocently on the table. She contacted a professional bookbinder with mechanical pleasantry. She used childlike single syllables to explain her request. He came and bound the new books in simple leather covers numbered 1 through 25. Only once out of sheer curiosity did he crack one of the books open. Between the power of the words he found there and the weight of the writer's hungry gaze on him, he firmly shut the book again. When he finished binding the last book, he dutifully carted them and the writer to the massive library on the corner of South and 2nd Street. Together they trundled the precious books to the smallest shelves in the library. The writer easily kicked aside the withered husk of the old librarian, which crumbled into dust at the first blow. She settled herself down beside the shelf. She would never be hungry again. She knew now, when the visitors realized that there were new books to be read, she knew just what to do, and she was happy. With the first 10 new readers, she proudly offered them a new trade, 2 years per book. Story 2. Lighthouse. Forgive me, as I am never sure where to begin telling a story. I never was a storyteller. I tend to include useless information and jump around, so I will do my best to do this story justice, considering it happened to me and the ones I love, changing us forever. I never really gave it much thought. I was under the impression everyone had the abilities that I do. I would be reading an article in some teeny bopper magazine about a beloved pop star, and suddenly an image would enter my mind of a frazzled young woman with wild, dark hair, panicking about the article being completed in time for publishing. I, of course, have no way to verify that this flash was at all what she was then, king as she wrote it, or if that even described her appearance, but it was eerie nonetheless. There is also my knowing the next song that would come on the radio, right down to humming any particular song, flipping on the radio, and have it playing, sometimes right where my humming of the tune left off. Even now, as a habitual skeptic, I am willing to argue radio stations only play about 10 different songs all day, but again, still eerie. Part of the reason I always thought this was ordinary was because I would often come across people like me, my old band's lead guitarist, who claimed to be able to hear people's thoughts, his daughter who said she could see auras, Sean, my friend who sold me my house, who can sense the dead and help them pass on to the afterlife, my friend of over 10 years, Charles, who always knows someone is about to call him before the phone even rings, and other things similar to my own experiences. There's also my lifelong friend, Sarah, who sees black shadows surrounding people who wish to do harm to others, a former co-worker named Tasha, who, on a regular basis, had to burn sage in her home to stop something from throwing dishes around her kitchen at night. And last but not least, my husband. As a small child, he climbed to the top of the stairs in his childhood home to find a man dressed in military fatigues and a bloody dot on his forehead who simply told him, "Don't do it." He was terrified, but eventually forgot about it. Until one day when he was 18, he looked up in the mirror while brushing his teeth and realized the guy on the stairs was himself. That year, he dropped out of our OTC, but as I grew older and got out in the world more, I found out I am actually weird. Sean said he rarely meets people like us, a staunch atheist. I don't even believe in this crap, yet it was all around me and being told by people I respect and trust more than anyone. I fear I am once more adding too much information, and perhaps I feel a need to defend my experience as I can. Almost hear the skeptics now. I am a skeptic. I tried to explain all this away. Hell, I wanted to. Since I can't speak for others, I might as well assume all those friends of mine are completely making all that stuff up. Fine with me. But I know what happened last year. I'll go ahead and tell it now. These abilities of mine waned as I got older, or I learned to ignore them. But after I had my son, things escalated quite quickly. He was, still is, a rather horrible sleeper. So I'll be the very first to say I was exhausted. His first 6 months of life, sleep deprivation, can do some crazy things to you. But that doesn't explain everything. One night around midnight I woke up, and in the faint glow of the night light I could see the bathrobes hanging on the back of my bedroom door, which meant the door was shut. We never shut our bedroom door at night, ever. At the time we didn't have a baby monitor, so it was a strict rule. Leave the door open. The bathrobes even helped it naturally swing open. So I was confused. But when I heard my child's screams, I instantly woke up completely. I bounded out of bed and growled to my husband. "Why would you shut the door?" He grudgingly insisted he hadn't. Annoyed, I ripped the door open and went across the hall to the baby's room. I bent over his crib and searched for his pacifier, all the while shushing softly and trying to soothe him That's when I heard it. Next to my ear his heartbeat bear was going woosha-woos, ha-woosha. I had turned that RF off at 8 p.m. It wasn't helping my son sleep, and it was getting annoying having to constantly reset the touchy timer. If you didn't click it back into the off position and wait long enough before turning it back on, no sound would come out. If you twisted the dial to fast, no sound would come out. So I had said F it and turned the damn thing off, and left it off. Now, let me be clear, at 4 months of age, my son was not pulling to standing. He did not have the fine motor skills to hardly pick up his own pacifier yet. The idea of him standing up, reaching through the crib slats to the back of the bear, and blindly, but perfectly, turning the bear on and making sound come out is downright laughable. It's like something out of that stupid Baby Geniuses movie. I couldn't explain it. A brand new bear with practically new batteries that had never turned itself on before and couldn't have possibly clicked itself into the on position was Beatty. NG next to my ear. Our son slept in our bed for the rest of that night. I contacted Sean the next morning. I had spent all night trying to understand how my door had shut itself, how a bear could turn itself back on. I kept reluctantly coming to the same conclusion. I was desperate for an answer. Sean said he could come over in a few days. Just in the meantime, tell it, whoever it was, to leave us alone. The next few days were excruciating. Sleepless nights and long days of feeling followed in my own home, of feeling like an idiot when telling an empty room to leave me alone as Sean's visit drew near. Activity in the house ramped up. Shower curtain rings would make sliding sounds on the curtain rod, knocking on the living room walls. My baby crying, looking at something just me. Sean performed a ritual using a crystal to communicate with the spirit. Sean claimed the spirit, a sad old man, had seen me and my baby out somewhere and attached himself to me. He hung out in the baby's room, but he liked my room the best. Sean asked if he meant us any harm, if he meant to wake the baby. Both were answered by swinging the crystal to say no, but we got a yes when asked about my clothes, door, and the bear. Sean helped him pass on, and I watched as the crystal went from circling to a stop. Sean had to come out one more time. We had invested in a video monitor at this point, and on one particularly hard evening, we sat in our son's pitch-black room and watched on the monitor to see if he stirred after we set him down. I don't entirely remember why or what we were hoping to accomplish through this. I just know we were tired. Then, in an instant, things went from calm. He let us set him down to upsetting, flying over his crib 2 feet from where we stood. Something appeared on the monitor for only a second. We had been in there for about 45 minutes at this point and knew there was no bug or fly. And besides, it didn't have wings. There was nothing physically there to explain what the hell had just appeared on the screen. Just a ball of white on the night vision monitor flying over my son's bed. I angrily left the room in tears. Why was this happening again? Sean agreed to come over the very next night. I don't remember this visit as well. I mostly remember being angry and confused. Sean said this time it was a woman who had passed away before she could have a baby. She loved babies and was sad she could never have them. I should have felt bad for her. I should have had sympathy. But I was pissed. Not only were these events negatively affecting our lives, but they were also making me question everything I had held as true about the world. So Sean had to sit me down and explain a few things. He told me I was what he called a lighthouse. Just as lighthouses guide sailors to land, I was a beacon of light to the spirits who are lost in between worlds. I'm someone who will notice them and lend some legitimacy to their confused state of existence. I will hear them knock on my walls and know it is them. They are not attaching themselves to me out of malice. They just want my help. I insisted I wanted nothing to do with them. Sean understood, but said I could only ignore it so much, as there will always be at least a little light emanating from me. I don't tell anyone this story, and I am even submitting it anonymously in the hopes that no one will ever attribute it to me. But I tell it because something has recently occurred to me, and I've decided the story must be told. These kinds of experiences did not happen to me before motherhood. I had funny things happen, like correctly guessing the song that was about to play or unwittingly surrounding myself with people who hold unique abilities. But as far as I can tell, I never got visits from spirits. I never had to tell invisible entities to leave me alone before. It wasn't until my son arrived on THIS Earth that these things started happening in our home, and it finally hit me as his mother. I must protect him, because I am not the lighthouse. He is. Story 3. Life's a mystery. We've all had our paranormal incidents. We've all had weird things, unexplainable things happen to us, and we remember these events. It's not something you brush off, no matter how long ago. Now see, I'm not a genius writer. I can't tell you a mind-blowing scary story that will knock your socks off, but I may give you chills. I'm just here to share my paranormal experiences because, well, everyone else would think I'm crazy. At least here I know there is someone reading through this and know that I wouldn't make this up. Well, here's one that stayed with me for a while. In grade 7, I made a new friend because, well, frankly, I didn't like the people in my school, and the new girl seemed to catch my attention because she was different. We became really good friends. We shared a lot of spooky stories with each other. She even told me that she practices voodoo, and that she learned how to somehow come out of her body and travel places like a ghost. Of course, this so bizarre I didn't believe it. But one night something strange happened to me. I only remember some of it. I woke in the middle of the night and went out of my room and stood in front of my door for a bit. But I wasn't fully aware of my actions. I truly believe I was possessed this night. I remember very, very quietly entering my parents' room and stood there. I raised my hand in front of me, facing their bed, and started to mumble something. I then remember appearing in the hallway again. I guess I walked out and went down the stairs, not making a creak in them. Hitch is actually very hard if you try. I don't remember why I went downstairs, but I remember going back into my bed. I felt really strange when I woke up. I knew I did that, but I wasn't aware or conscious of it all at once. It spooked me really bad. See now, what scared me more is that my friend came up to me and told me she saw this happen. Her ghost saw this happen. She tried to wake me somehow. She told me I was possessed as my eyes didn't look like my own. It spooked me because she wasn't there. She wasn't with me. she never slept over, but she knew what happened. It will ever be a mystery to me. That story is 100% real. It still scares me to this day. I get goosebumps about it. I have many other paranormal spooky stories. I'll tell you tomorrow. I visit by Bilbao, Spain every year in the summer because I have family. There, I have my grandmother, great-grandmother, grandpa, uncle, cousins, just a whole whack of them. There is this town called Ayot, pronounced Ai. It's a very, very small town. It's made up of apartments, a stretched plaza, road to a mountain-like highway to leave, and a beach. That's it. You can even search us up and see some pictures. It's called Ayot, Biscay anyway. My uncle stays there, sometimes with my aunt and cousin. My cousin, being small, wants me to tag along for a couple days. I'll be honest, I don't like going there. Just because there's really not much to do because your only option is to go to the beach, really. So my cousin is small, but old enough to take me around and just walk alone together. One of them. Why, first times there she tells me about a bridge. I wasn't too interested at first until we started walking across it, and she told me it was said to be one of the oldest bridges there. It was medieval. I know what you're thinking. Something terrible happened on that bridge, and it's gonna scare the crap out of me. Well, no, not that I know of. I just thought it was cool. That bridge was medieval. But as we were walking along the bridge, in one of the house windows I saw a very faded, dark face staring back. I didn't think much of it 'cause I thought it was just a person and didn't want to spook my cousin as we get ready for bed because me and my cousin stayed in the same room. I feel a bit of uncertainty. Have you ever had that feeling? If you've ever slept at someone else's house, you feel uncomfortable and don't really get good vibes. That's how I felt. I ignored it, convinced myself I was just being a paranoid shut-in, but I was woken in the middle of the night to something strange. I woke up with tired eyes, still half asleep, to a tall, dark, shadowy figure. I stared at it. I didn't even have time to process it, either. It was just my uncle, and it was too dark to see, so I said his name softly in a question form. I analyzed the figure and was quick to realize it wasn't him. It was 2 years ago, so I don't clearly remember what the figure said. What it said, something along the lines of "Get out, you need to leave now." I'm 100% sure it told me to get out. I just can't remember what followed, but something close to that. I was terrified. It was pointing at me. I remember what it looked like so clearly. It was a very tall, dark figure with a skinny body and long arms. I awoke twice to this. The first time when it was standing in front of my bed, but I quickly went back to sleep, and the second time when that happened, the only difference is it was standing in front of the door. To this day, I'm not sure why this happened. I'm not sure if this wanted me out or it was a warning. This is also a mystery to me. I don't know if it was something evil or something trying to help. All I know is that it scared the living shit out of me, and the next day I left, all I could think about was that on the way back to my grandma's, I'm still scared to go there to sleep there. I got one more for you guys again. These are all real stories. My uncle passed away about 3 years ago now. I was in the 8th grade. He passed from a heart attack in his work office. He was laying there for about 15 minutes. It was too late when someone came. Now, fast forward to his funeral. I'm sitting there front row, silent, teeth clenched, staring out to his corpse, trying not to cry in front of everyone. I see people pass by his coffin, giving their prayers to him and their condolences to me and my family. Some were hysterical, some were slightal. Why saddened me? Well, I was just there clenching my teeth the whole time. Anywho, there was a long period of time given for anyone to go up and put something in his casket, say a prayer and what not. Nah, it took a while for me to pluck up the courage for that, 'cause of all the glaring eyes behind me, and most importantly, I'm standing over my uncle's corpse. My favorite uncle, my best friend. Keep in mind, I had nothing to put in his casket, but I wasn't going to leave knowing I'm leaving nothing. So when I plucked up the courage, I suddenly had an idea. My favorite right bracelet. It wasn't much, but I wore it all the time and I really loved it. It wasn't nothing fancy. It had a brown leather band with a latch at the end, and in the middle was a silver square W with a symbol engraved in the middle, with two other smaller single squares on each side. It fit snug on my wrist. It was the only thing I had, so I decided, why not? I unhooked the latch and placed it in. His hands kissed his forehead, which was cold and depressing. Have you ever kissed a corpse before? I said something to him, knelt down at the pedestal and prayed, then went back to my seat. Now, fast forward about a week or two later, I wake up in one of the strangest ways possible. I immediately sat up, turned my head to left, looked down and flipped my blanket over. To my show, I see a bracelet I've never seen before. It was weird enough to wake up like that, and this to follow. Wow, I didn't know what to do. I was a mix of emotions, but I decided to tell my mom. At first I thought she had placed it there, but then logically thinking, why would she come into my room in the middle of the night to place a bracelet under my blanket right beside me? I'm not a deep sleeper. I would have heard it. I told her about it, and she laughed. What you think your Tio put it there to return the favor? Hey, haha, you're so funny. But I wasn't joking around. I was being completely serious. It made me mad they didn't believe me. The bracelet is thin. It's a circular black leather band with a silver hook on. It has a B, bead in the middle that's an oval shaped. It's a deep blue, purple mix with a bit of glitter. On one side it has a pink painted on flower, and the other side it's a half pink and purple painted on butterfly. It then has two small little plates, I guess you could describe it, to hold it in place, followed by two silver beads on each end, the same circular plates, and then a coral-looking silver attachment on both sides to hold in place. I'm holding it as I'm describing it. The hook to put it on broke off, but I still kept it because it is so remarkable and seemingly impossible for it to happen that I could not keep it. I'll tell you, life is strange. I look at it as one big mystery. How's it possible to have something there and physically leave something over, but at the same time not be visible to the naked eye? It's a crazy concept. I could go on for ages about my thoughts about life, how things work, but I'll just leave it at there for you to ponder the thought for a while. Story for roommate. So what time you gonna be here? Tyler asked me impatiently, his voice obviously frustrated. 'Cause, like, the storm's gonna hit any second, and I wanna get dinner cooked now in case the power goes out. I glanced up at the gray sky from underneath my umbrella and saw a large front of ominous-looking clouds steadily drifting this way. No joke, I replied loudly as I shouted over the sound of falling rain and thunder. I'm on the corner of Eldred and Warren now, so I'll be there in like 5 minutes. All right, I'll start the oven now. I flinched at a particularly loud crack of thunder and quickened my pace. What are we eating anyway? I asked, to keep my mind occupied and help me ignore the squishing of my soaking wet socks. I guess, Tyler responded, and I could imagine his cocky grin. I sighed knowingly. Pepperoni pizza with black olives and jalapenos. Pepperoni pizza with black olives and jalapenos. Yes, sir. That is correct, Tyler began. It is the ultimate comfort food, as you get a little bit of everything. You got your vegetables and your dairy and your wheat, and... Are you here yet? I looked around, confused. And the rain? No. Oh, never mind then. Thought I heard the doorbell. I shook my head. You don't even have a doorbell. You complained about it yesterday. The rainwater was collecting now, running down the streets and sidewalks in a rapid torrent. I could see the stream break against my boots, carrying dirt and leaves and little twigs with it. I shivered as the wind blew hard, and cast misty spray against my face and neck. I slipped and caught myself against a fence post. Hey, man, I'll be there in a bit. I'm hanging up before I bust my ass and my new phone. See you. See ya. I hung up and slid my cell into my pocket. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, and I blinked away the afterimages as I trudged along the line of yards where the sidewalk ended. I grimaced as my boots slurped in and out of the mud with sickening wet squelches, letting me know I would soon be filthy. I cursed under my breath and silently berated myself for getting talked into this. Should have stayed home, walking 3 miles through the rain with a storm on the way just to hang out was a terrible idea. Should have just stayed in bed. My curmudgeonly conversation with Mize LF continued for several minutes until at long last, sopping wet and freezing, I found myself on the doorstep of T.J.'s new house. It was old and weathered, with faded paint and windows so scratched they looked foggy. The grass, despite the rain this autumn had brought, was yellow and dead. I walked up the cracked driveway and to the front door. I knocked on it loudly and shivered as I rapped my arms around myself. No answer. I knocked again, banging my fist against the wooden door so hard flecks of chipped green paint broke off and flittered to the ground. Tyler, it's me. Open the damn door. The door swung open with a loud creak and Tyler's face smiled at me from within. Sorry, man. Couldn't hear you over all the noise. He waved me inside and I kicked off my boots and threw my jacket in the corner to get the wet chill off of me. He looked me over and laughed, his green eyes crinkling at the corners as he guffawed at my current state. So how'd it go? He asked sarcastically. I groaned and headed down the hall. Lovely. Now where's your bathroom? First door on the left. Pizza's almost done at least, he called after me as I padded down the wood floors in jeans heavy with rainwater. The house was bigger than I expected. Sure, it was old and needed a lot of work done, but it was good-sized. It had that old 70s style layout with lots of little rooms sectioned off into their own areas as such. I didn't see much of the place as I walked past closed doors to get to the bathroom. The door at the end of the hall inch open as I approached, then shut a moment later. Guess his roommates aren't the chatty type. Works for me. I toweled off in the bathroom and laid my jeans out to dry, slipping into a pair of sweatpants. Tyler had sat on the counter. I flicked the light off and went down the hall toward the kitchen to get some pizza, my stomach growling ravenously. The door at the end of the hall squeaked open behind me, and then the bathroom door closed. I looked over my shoulder and saw the bathroom light on again. "Here's your half," Tyler announced, and set for slices of pizza on the table. "TV signal LS out due to the weather, but we can still watch a movie. Sounds good." I mumbled through a mouthful of piping hot pizza and followed him into the living room. The house was dark, I noted. In every room, the floors were all wood, no carpet, and the walls were painted a deep gray like the thunderclouds overhead. The lights seemed dim despite having new bulbs, and made color wash away and fade. I shivered. Tyler glanced at me. "Still cold? I got a hoodie you can wear." I nodded, and he tossed a red pullover my way. Some comedy I wasn't really paying attention to played on the television. Tyler laughed here and there, sometimes repeating the jokes and pointing, but I felt detached. I set my pizza down, appetite diminished, and flinched as one of the bedroom doors in the house slammed shut. I could hear them moving around in their room, possibly rearranging furniture, and glanced at Tyler to see if he had reacted to the noise. But he hadn't. Having lived only on my own since graduation, I wasn't used to having someone else in the house. My apartment was small, not quite cramped, but certainly on the cozy side. As such, I had everything exactly as I wanted it and not a single thing out of place. It was quiet and well lit, with thick, cushy carpet and central heating. One bedroom, one bath, 0 roommates making such a ruckus. I opened my mouth to voice such concerns, then realized it could come off as snobbish. I bit my lip and kept silent, not wanting to offend my friend by insulting his new house and roommate whom I had never met. "You fool already?" Tyler asked me, and I shrugged. "Not really hungry, I guess." "Well, damn." He reached out and snatched up my remaining slices. "I'll take that off your hands." My mouth felt dry and sticky, so I got up and walked over to the kitchen, my mind still wandering as I listened to the commotion going on in the next room. There was a loud scraping like someone dragging a bed or dresser, and I could feel the vibrations rumbling through the floor. I sipped on my tea and looked around the kitchen, noting the lack of appliances and that there were only 2 chairs at the table. The scraping stopped suddenly. The bedroom door creaked open loudly, and I looked up from my cup, expecting to see someone coming down the hall. Instead, I heard a different door open and shut, followed by a thumping like someone jumping up and down. "What the hell are they doing in there?" Tyler laughed loudly as a series of shouts echoed from the flat screen and into the empty house. I glanced at him and then to the TV. When the light in the kitchen went out, a door slammed in the hall. The movie continued playing, and I could see the light on the microwave still blinking cheap as S-bulbs. I groaned and went to turn the light off. Before switching the light bulb out, when I paused, the light switch was down. I glanced back at Tyler, then peered around the hall. The endless knocking and banging around still going strong. "So what's the deal with this place?" I asked aloud as I flipped the switch and the light came back on. "What do you mean?" Tyler asked after a moment's distraction as he paused the movie. I sat down in the lumpy chair his dad had given him and gestured to the house as a whole with my hands. "Like, how'd you get it? And from who?" "Oh, just some old man. Italian, I think. Mr. Scarpino or something like that." I waited for him to continue, but he just took a bite of pizza. "And how do you hear about it?" He shrugged. "Just saw it posted online. Me and like 2 other guys came in, looked at it. One of them got it. Then the old man called me like a week later saying it was available and I moved in." I chewed my lip. Why was it open again? The guy moved out, just up, and left. The wall behind me jolted violently and knocked over a bottle of whiskey Tyler had on display. It shattered and splashed across the floor, leaving the house suddenly silent. Tyler cursed loudly and jumped up to clean it. "All right, enough of this crap. I don't care if it's rude. This is nothing compared to what the dasha bag in the other room is doing." I sighed and sat my tea down as Tyler threw a towel over the spilled liquor. "Hey, man, seriously? What's up with your roommate?" Tyler looked up from the towel and laughed, his eyes staring up at the ceiling before meeting mine. "That's how I got the place so cheap." I tilted my head to the side, confused. "So, what, he just pays a bigger share of rent?" He laughed again and sat down, looking around for the remote. The commotion in the room escalated suddenly to an all-time high, and I grew tense. My fingers dug into the armrest so if my chair, the walls rattled and shook as if there were an earthquake, even the windows jostling flimsily. Tyler pressed play on the remote, the couch beneath him creaking as the impacts against the wall hit it. "No, man." He glanced at me out of the corner of his eye. "I don't have a roommate. Story 5, they come home to roost. This farm has been in my family for 2 generations. I've always enjoyed the peace and solitude since I was a boy. Just me and my folks. Now, there's just me. They died a few years back, leaving the place to me, and I've been doing my best to keep enough cash coming in to pay the taxes on the land, though why anybody'd want this place but me these days is beyond me. My grandpa was kind of a recluse and wanted a fair peace, so to stand see between us and the city slickers, as he called them. It's about 15 miles to the nearest town, down a couple worn ruts in the woods that turn into a strip more dirt than road before it finally hits the rural route to town. The old joke about, you know, you're a redneck and directions to your house start with after you turn off the paved road. Yeah, that always used to kill him. Sorry. It's getting hard to concentrate. Mind wanders. I'm leaving this recording on the off chance someone from town notices I haven't stopped by for a bit and sends the law down this way to check on me. My advice to you is leave now while you still can. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. First thing I noticed was wrong was a couple nights ago when Sammy, that's my dog, start Ed barking up a storm in the middle of the night. Not too surprising, We live, like I said, way out at the end o' nowhere, and there's possums and raccoons and a few dogs livin' out in the woods, and sometimes they come on my land to try their luck. Anyhow, Sammy's a good dog, and just a few snarls from him is usually enough to convince most critters to hightail it back into the Rees. But that night there was something different. It was like he was crazy or something, snarling and yelping like mad. Not a bark, mind you, a yelp. Y'all with dogs know what I mean. That kind of noise they make when they're caught someplace between territorial anger and fear. I grabbed my jeans, shoved my feet into an old pair of work boots, and grabbed my shotgun, figuring something bigger might be about. This ain't bear country, but in lean times I've seen evolve for to pacing the edge of the fence, testing the water, so to speak. Once I seen a cat, almost as big as Sammy out there. I shit you not, I'd to know what it was. Maybe a cougar or something. You'd have to ask a hunter. Which, to Daddy's disappointment, I never turned out to be much of slaughtering a chicken, so TTH. The occasional pig was as far as I went, and I ain't ever been comfortable even with that much. Where was I? Oh yeah, Sammy and the chickens. Like I said, I went running out in the dark, but there was enough of a decent moon to see a bit, and the ruckus started up in the coop. It's around the back of the barn, and anybody who knows chickens knows why we kept that coop as far from our open window as possible. There I am on the front porch, and Sammy's straining his tether, but he's all hunched down, tail between his legs, but he's still raising all kinds of hell. I figure something's going after the chickens, and I decide to leave him tied for the moment, 'cause he just didn't look right, muzzle all foamy like he was rabid. Anyhow, I ran out to the barn and grabbed my flashlight, and the chickens are squawking enough to raise the dead. Hey, I come out the back door, and by the flashlight I see something's torn a big-ass hole in the chicken wire fence, and there's blood and feathers everywhere. By the time I had the latch unhooked, the nose was already dying down, so I knew whatever got in there found what it wanted and left. Probably while I was still on the porch, I took a deep breath and went on in. Seeing a few dead hens with bite marks in them, I made a quick count, and one was gone. Likely a wild dog or a fox, I thought. I spent a few minutes carrying them out and chucked them out behind the co-op, figuring I'd bury them after it was light. The hens settled down by then, and I went on back to the house, stopping to pet Sammy, letting him know he did his job. He was laying down by then, tail still under him. He whined at me, but let me scratch him, and I went back to bed. I raised up around sunrise, and after breakfast headed back to the barn to bury the chickens and mend the fence more than a little. Just about it, 'cause I already had a ton to do out in the field. There's always the W's to do out here. Weeding, watering, and had not as Daddy used to say I had enough to jury-rig a cover for the hole, but it was gonna take a trip to town to get more wire to do it right. As I walked out to the truck, I paused, realizing what I hadn't heard yet. Sammy usually gives a little noise at least, but I hadn't heard a thing this morning. His tether was chewed clean through, and I didn't have enough time to hunt him down. That'd be another couple hours lost, and he's big enough to handle himself. I figured it was well afternoon by the time I got back, and there was still no sign of Sammy. I tried not to worry too much, knowing he'd come back once he got hungry. I finished fixing the coop, fence, and spread their feed, but they seemed like they weren't interested. I figured the scare and the blood smell made 'em skittish, to want to stay in the coop a while longer. Hell, they'll eat when they're hungry too, I thought. I went into the barn and grabbed my shovel to go bury the hens, but they weren't there. Now I'm thinking the smell of blood might have made Sammy a little feral, and he grabbed 'em for a snack out in the woods. Fine by me, long as he came back. It's one less thing I had to deal with. It was about an hour till sundown, and I was bone tired by the time my chores were done, and I was starting to get a little worried with Sammy still not coming back. I could hear rustling from time to time back in the shade of the woods, but it was too deep and dim to see him. I called him a few times, and the rustling came closer, but after a while I gave up and went on in. He'd already had something to eat, and I hadn't. The larder was pretty bare, and much as it galled me, I knew I'd have to slaughter another hen, soon while it was still light out. When it rains it pours. With a weary sigh, I went back out to the barn once again, stopping for my hatchet. It was near sundown when I got to the coop, and I could still hear the damn dog romping around in the woods, but it was louder and closer now, so at least he was happy and near. As I opened the door, though the smell damn near made me gag. It was always bad, but never anything like that. I held my breath as as I could and went in. The first thing that hit me, other than the smell, was the silence in the darkened coop. What little light there was reflected in their little beady eyes, but none of them not a flutter, not a cluck, nothing but those eyes watching me. I grabbed a decent-sized hen and got the hell out of there before I panicked or puked. The hen didn't struggle at all when I put in on the block, just lay there, looking at me. I raised my hatchet, took a breath, and swung one good, clean chop. The body dropped away from the head and took off, bubbling unsteadily, while I waited for the damn thing to realize it was dead and drop. What came out of the hole, though, wasn't blood, more like some black, gooey crap that looked foul and smelled worse, and it just kept moving. The longer it wobbled around the yard, the more unnerved I felt. Dear God, how long had it already been? That was when I felt it. I yelped and looked down at my hand, seeing the damned head had bitten a plug out it. I sucked on the wound reflexively as the eyes continued to watch my movement. The last of the light had begun to drain away, and I heard the rustling in the coop as the rest of the chickens began to stir. I swallowed, and the blood from my hand burned on the way down, dropping me to my knees as I retched and gagged. As I knelt there dry heaving, the rest of the chickens streaked toward me, little taloned feet clawing at me in a blind fury. The other hens had reached the door of the co-op by then, and dozens of eyes now gazed at me. Hungrily, I crawled to the gate, keeping the maniacal, headless corpse back by swinging my hatchet as the others slowly moved forward. On the other side of it was Sammy, but it wasn't him either. I just started screaming and swinging wildly, thinking if I could reach the shelter of my house I would be okay. But my hand was growing numb, and streaks of black were already creeping up my wrist. I was covered in that black goo by the time I slammed the door shut behind me, leaving me in a silence only broken by my gasping breath and the scratching and pecking at the door. I fumbled for my old tape recorder, knowing by the coldness in my left arm and the thickness of my tongue. It was too late for me, but it's not too late for you. If you're listening to this, then run. Don't look around, especially if it's getting dark. It's a long way to town, and the rustling in the woods is only getting louder. And, sick as I feel, I'm getting kinda hungry. Story 6, Books Archive. It seems we can't find what you're looking for. Perhaps searching can help. Story 7, The Silent Pool. I guess I'll start off with the mundane introduction as to who I am and why I am telling you this. They want me to hide my identity, so just call me. I'm currently 16 years old, and I'm on holiday in the Philippines. My mom was Filipina. As a result, we spent most summers here to escape the dreary gray skies of Britain. I have to admit that the change of scenery is really rejuvenating. I had just finished my GCSS exams, so lazing around on a beach for a few weeks seemed ideal. The Philippines, on the whole, is a vast place, being more of an archipelago than a country. On the night of the 26th, my father, mother, and I left Manila, the city W. Here the airport is, and headed for M. They don't want me to tell you. It's a beach resort with palm trees, coral, and sunsets in abundance. That's about all I can say. I think it's not the average resort you come across, as the actual accommodation was in traditional Filipino style, wooden villas overlooking the turquoise sea. I stayed in Villa 22, whereas my parents stayed in 23. The two villas were connected by a bamboo bridge on the first floor, so they could check up on me to see if I was getting on all right. I lived a pretty sedentary lifestyle, so the majority of my days were spent listening to music on the hammock, tied to protruding wooden logs on the balcony. Mom and Dad knew that. From an early age I had been relatively independent, so they would only see how I was doing once a day, if that. Allowance would be given, and we would only meet for occasional lunch and dinner. This resort was built upon a hill, meaning the stairs going our villas were extremely steep. The steps were essentially rock slabs with encrusted seashells going up the hill. From what I can remember, it was a fairly old resort. The staff maintained the grounds well, but you could see wear and tear in some of the rooms, and the swimming pool had an unnerving reddish tint. I never saw anyone enter it. Signposts were scattered across the hotel, directing guests to one of the several restaurants, spas, and restrooms on the tiny island. Being curious, I asked the resort staff if there was another swimming pool on the island, as the color W. As to off-putting, I have had eczema, among other multiple skin conditions, for all my life, and the sea's salt water sting like hell. Contrary to their usual upbeat, helpful and a tour, the Filipino staff seemed hesitant to even respond to my question. I repeated the question at least 2 or 3 times to other staff across the space of an hour, and the only response I got blank icy stares. Asking the staff here was practically pointless, so I took it upon myself to go online. The search results were strange, to say the least. Nothing. Not just that, it was like this resort was non-existent on the internet, even with the hundreds of guests staying weekly. No reviews, no pictures, absolutely nothing. A couple of days after this, I took it upon myself to personally search the island. The island's perimeter was 2 miles at best, and I was feeling confident that I could find a pool especially as we weren't the only resort here. I hadn't actually seen the other resorts, but loud laughter and native music could be heard during the night from across the island. At this point, my memory gets a bit hazy. The small, insect-ridden nature path I had taken to find this pool had just stopped. I looked back, and all that I could see was a tropical forest staring back at me, with thick air resting on the forest floor. I head east, I thought. So logically, I opened up the compass on my iPhone and headed west to return to the resort. As I said, my recollection from now is not great, but I distinctly remember walking for hours in between trees and being unable to find the trail. It seemed like the forest would never end, despite heading in the exact same direction. Then a lifeline, a signpost in the distance. In fact, it was identical to the ones at the resort, which filled me with joy. Surely this meant I was back, safe and sound. Except I wasn't. The rotten signpost had 5 arrows pointing out of the top, all in the same direction left. It simply read, "Silent Pool," engraved deeply in the wooden signs. I knew heading back to the resort was futile, and at least the pool must have so. Beyond about that I could talk to about returning. At this point, I didn't even fancy swimming anymore. The dense jungle faded almost instantly. Instead, a long line of stepping stones along a calm, flowing stream. I wanted to look back to see if the forest was still there, but I couldn't. I was drawn to the stepping stones like mouse to cheese. Step by step, I made my way across the stream, towards a building. I can't explain what it was, but it was unbelievably tall, and it casted a huge shadow across me. Its lime green and beige coat of paint was old and flaky to the touch. Again, the words "Silent Pool" were engraved on the lone, skinny door. There was no turning back now. Having no doorknob or handle, I had to kick the door with some force. After 2 or 3 tries, it swung open with a bellowing thud, and, true to its word, there was in fact a silent pool. It had a hot spring style to it, being dug directly into the ground with steaming natural water. No bud. Why was around, and the derelict structure I found myself in looked like it hadn't seen a visitor in years. I undressed, put on my swimming shorts, and slowly entered the silent pool. I gotta admit, at first it was pretty relaxing. It was really just like any other hot spring, which made me wonder why it was so secluded and unmaintained. Was there an accident here? Did they run out of money? I laid there in the silent pool, feeling increasingly uneasy minute after minute. The only thing that was really comforting me were the crickets and birds making noises in the background. This white noise helped to distract my mind from overthinking too much, and just like that, it stopped. The crickets and birds were just silenced. With my back to my change of clothes, I turned around, and exited the silent pool, too afraid to continue bathing. As I looked up from where my clothes were positioned, 2 figures glared down at me. They were both completely charcoal black, with a slender build, no limbs bar 1 arm each, and hollowed-out holes for eyes, no mouth, no emotion. Yet I could feel the 2 beings smiling. The hairs on my body stood up with fright beyond comparison. I opened my mouth to scream for help, but nothing came out. The left figure, much shorter than the right, picked up my clothes and politely handed them to me and helped me out of the silent pool. Why, then I thought, if they wanted to kill me, I would be dead already. This unsettling fact eased me a bit, and over a minute or so I began to notice their friendly nature. Maybe they were angels or spirits of good. Without making a sound, the two entities glided across the stony surface around the pool and out the door I had opened. The outside that I could see through the door was nothing, and by nothing, I literally mean no space, no matter, just emptiness. It wasn't black. It wasn't any color, for that matter. I turned around and yelled at the beings for an explanation. The taller right-hand side spirit simply carved the word Mata into the side of the wall with its lone arm. For those who don't know Tagalog, it translates to eyes after looking at the word, observing it carefully to see anything else I hadn't spotted. I looked back up at the towering dark spirits. They both did a synchronized point to their respective hollow eye holes before pointing to my fingers. At this point, as any logical person would, I ran. Well, I try, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in space, with only my limbs being free from this paralysis. I try to ring the police from my phone, but instead I was greeted with a red screen. If I tried turning it on, they were still pointing at my fingers. I didn't know what exactly they were asking, so I asked them nervously what they wanted. Both of them got the sharp end of their stump arms and carved holes into their faces. They didn't bleed or even react with any pain from this. They didn't have skin. Exactly. But I didn't want to find out what it was instead, to be honest. Then it spoke. The sheer fact it spoke was creepy enough, but its voice was my father's son, D.U. Washington. Anti-happiness, it asked me. I replied with a hesitant yes, shielding my face with my hands. I couldn't bear looking at its hollowed-out eyes anymore. The shorter left spirit, this time with my mother's voice, asked me the exact same question, to which I replied yes. They explained to me how I got lost in the human world and ended up in their world by mistake. They said that human eyes don't see the world fully, but only what evil entities want you to see. They will create a normal-looking matrix reality for you to live in before capturing your soul. When you die, everybody goes to hell, except not me. I wouldn't want that. With the most assured I felt in a long time, I got my hands and clawed away, piece of flesh by piece of flesh, before digesting the remains of my eye. I didn't feel pain, only happiness. A lot of time has passed since then. I can't remember the last time I heard another voice except my parents. It must have been hundreds of years ago now. They would tell me every day how beautiful the world here is and how they love me. I love them too. I really do. Their cold embrace comforts me. I wait patiently with my mother and my father for Annette, her lost soul, that we can help come visit the silent pool.